The rent in Massachusetts is ridiculous, and everybody cannot afford to pay $2,000 and up for rent. So, especially if you have a family, everybody in this community is not making six figures to afford that high rent. And so something like this to support the community, that's how you want to keep people in the community. You don't want to run them out of the community.
I'm Aarti Halbe. We're in Boston's Roxbury neighborhood, where Urban Edge, a community development organization, works to help its community address the crisis of housing affordability. Urban Edge has brought together a housing collective that includes leaders from across the community, including the community organizers at Reclaim Roxbury. They've held events to learn from residents, and in fact, you just heard an attendee at one of those events. Now, the Roxbury Housing Collective is putting what they've learned to use to tackle rent control as one important tool for affordability. In what follows, you'll hear leaders from Reclaim Roxbury, along with community members, on rent control, Boston's housing crisis, and mobilizing people to take on that crisis.
My name is Armani White, and I'm the executive director and co-founder of Reclaim Roxbury.
And I'm Cole Gibson. I'm the organizing director at Reclaim Roxbury.
Being able to afford to stay in your community has been an issue for Black and brown communities across the country, and especially here in Boston and in Roxbury. So, rent control is major. In our community, you can go way, way back if you really want to go into the dispossession in Black communities, the lack of investment in Black and brown communities, and in working class communities of any ethnicity or race. And then if you get even closer, we look at 2008 foreclosure crisis. The foreclosure crisis was a major moment in communities across the country where Black and brown families who had managed to buy homes, sometimes not in the best way through subprime mortgages, but those who did, basically the bubble burst and a lot of people lost value, all they owned. And so you have this point of view that homeownership is the thing that'll get us free. And we've seen in our community, throughout time, whether it's dispossession, through like direct taking, through urban renewal, whether it's through banks and through mortgages, kind of like, or through the economy falling out from under, people losing homes. Rent control is a part of the solution of getting us back to a stable position, and it helps prevent people from losing their homes and being kicked out of their communities.
Trevor LaFosse is a community organizer at Urban Edge. With funding from Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and the Healthy Neighborhoods initiatives in 2023, Urban Edge put together a team of organizations, including Reclaim Roxbury, committed to the community and formed the Roxbury Housing Collective.
And that first summer, we held 3 separate listening sessions, bringing together over 300 area residents, asking them to identify which housing-related issue most impacted themselves and their families. And so really the results spoke loudly and clearly. Roughly 87% of respondents listed the cost of housing as the most critical issue being faced here in Roxbury. Knowing that, we researched and found a statewide coalition led by Homeless for All Massachusetts that was prioritizing the issue of lifting the ban on rent control. And so by the latter half of 2024, the collective was planning and executing public education events, from Zoom meetings to tabling to hosting information sessions utilizing popular education. The goal was really to kind of plant this seed to the community, to hear stories from them and really let them know there was an opportunity for them to right this historic wrong and finally end the statewide ban on rent control.
For those that don't know, housing and addressing it, it's a multifaceted issue, right? There's just a lot of different pieces. A lot of times you hear the governor talking about supply, and that's the big thing is supply. But the issue with that economically is you can build as much supply as you want to, but you'll still have speculators, you'll still have developers, property management companies that buy up those new units or are building those new units and then setting the prices at levels that are just unattainable and unaffordable. And so it can be just as much an accelerant to gentrification and displacement as building anything else that we rail against regularly in the community, whether it's a large-scale luxury apartment complex or a new amenity that comes in and raises people's property values, right? So rent control and vacancy control are ways to sort of regulate the market so that no matter what's being built, people in that given area can still afford to live there. Folks of working class means, whether they're moving in or staying, can afford to be in these places that sorely need their talents and expertise. And like there are other parts to it. There's tenant protections that need to happen to make sure that landlords and developers, property managers can't just kick people out of places whenever they want to, because another thing that happens is what happens after a rent-controlled unit, someone moves out of it, can they raise it to market rate? All these different pieces, but rent control is an important part because it plays that regulatory role where it just makes sure that prices in a given locality cannot rise above a certain level so folks can afford it.
My name is Alexis Smith. I am a Dorchester resident, and I've been living in Boston, Massachusetts for 43 years now. I should be able to go home and get a good night's rest and not have to worry if my gas is going to be shut off, my electricity is going to be shut off, if I'm going to be evicted. How can I meet an economic change and not be behind if the resources don't come or the proper training that I need to transition to keep up with the economic change so that I can meet those bills, so that isn't the case of me being sent those letters. I got many of them in the past. And it wasn't that I wasn't trying. It wasn't that I wasn't getting up. It wasn't that I wasn't showing up. It was the games that kept me from elevating and progressing so that I could get better nights to sleep and not have to worry about an eviction or gas being cut off or electricity be cut off because I can't afford it. Each year things go up, but people don't get a raise every year. What I think rent control can contribute is it could allow folks to catch up where the games have been played.
Boston used to have rent control, as folks may or may not know. When we started in 2015, it was you couldn't really even talk about rent control seriously. It was like a taboo thing, like really radical to be talking about wanting rent control. But as time has gone on since COVID and I'd say the George Floyd uprisings, there's been a shift a bit in how we see what's possible and how we understand what are the solutions to issues in our community. And rent control has become, somewhat of a thing that people, it's something that our mayor now is advocating for. It's something that is in the legislature as a bill. And so, we have this beautiful coalition that we're building to try to make sure that it passes and that the governor, supports it and that we can, if it goes to the ballot, have public support. It's a big part of what we're doing, and it's been an issue in our community for a long time, both when it came to be and then when it ended. It's just been a long history.
The crazy thing is, think about it, it could be worse, right? I'm from Atlanta originally, and a report just came out that said that the Black Mecca is now one of the most gentrified cities in the country. Is the most top-ranked gentrified cities in the country with rapid displacement happening. No longer majority Black, which I think obviously there are other minorities mixed in there, but just the point being that this has been happening for about a decade, if not longer, in Atlanta. And I always tell folks that I wish there was a Reclaim Roxbury in Atlanta back, not only when I was there, but way further back, because there was no force in the city, really. I'm sure there are people that tried to fight back against it, but no one doing the work that Reclaim does and that advocates in Boston did back in the day to stop as much of urban renewal and the highway movement as they could. So there was that displacement, but now it's just really ramping up, and it's been happening in Atlanta for the better part of a decade. That's a precursor to what is starting to sort of happen here in Boston and Roxbury, if it weren't for organizations like Reclaim and other community-based partners like Urban Edge and some of the CDCs stepping in to try and halt this sort of aggressive displacement. That's just the crazy part to me, is that, it's already pretty bad. We get residents all the time talking about places shutting down, being bought up, folks getting displaced. In my mind, I'm just like, this is just the beginning if we don't really lock in, especially around rent control, and fight back on this. Like, it can get much, much worse. lot of the organizers that I worked with back in the day, and even still when I see glimpses peeking in, is they just want to do the work of outside agitation and not really get inside and be willing to gum up the works, be willing to be there and be a stopgap, right? And so they'll do that, and the powers that be can stare from outside their window and be like, well, that's nice, but I'm still going to vote for this thing because you didn't do it the way that we want you to do, which is not necessarily makes it right that you have to, do it XYZ way, but that's just the way the world is. And so it takes like, I'm going to go meet you in your city council, in your city hall office, or I'm going to show up here and just be annoying, but that's the boring work, right? Of having to sit there for an hour or two in a meeting. Like when we had to hop on the Roxbury Strategic Master Planning Oversight Committee meetings once a month from 6 to 7:45. That's not fun. Sometimes it can get exciting. Sometimes they can pop off in there, but it's typically not fun. But that's the meetings you need to be in to know what's being built in your community, to know, okay, this development's happening, this one has X standards. Do they meet our standards for development? No, then I need to say something about it. Otherwise, by the time you do that protest, it's too late. They're already breaking ground. The most you can possibly do is like delay that construction, but even then that's not guaranteed. And so that's what I see that, Reclaim does, and Urban Edge and the Collective does, the work we do, that really, really helps.
Who said it's boring? No, I'm kidding. kidding. No, I think one of the things that helps to get people to care about things that might not seem worth their time is through really understanding and meeting people where they're at, getting to know them and what the issues they care about. And through that, you get to learn more about what people want to get into and can help them to see that the work that we're doing is that kind of work.
My name is Sharon Champion. I grew up in Roxbury. I've worked in Boston in like the inner city. That was something that I enjoyed, really. I don't really care for like the hustle and bustle of like downtown. I work in the community, live in the community. So it's pretty convenient, and to be around all the changes of, the neighborhood. I'm just looking out the window now, like looking at the old White Rock soda building where it's now housing for folks. So, just seeing the changes and stuff, I think make me like it more. I look at the lack of housing as a health issue, a public health issue, and I work in the health field. To see that patients coming through the clinic where I work, a lot of them mention my rent's too high, or they live with someone else because they can't afford to live on their own. The younger folks who are now moving into adulthood can't really afford to move out of home with mom and dad to really venture out on their own because, the rent prices are just really too high. If you don't have a place to live, there's absolutely no way that you're not stressed out by that. Having a place to live and just being worried about not meeting rent that particular month can be stressful, and we all know what stress does to your health. If you have an underlying health condition and you're stressing your body out, that just makes things worse. Or if you are a healthy person, but you're stressing out over your housing situation, that can cause other things. Even if it didn't affect me and it affected just people around me, I would still push for the cause. I would still, try to work because at the end of the day, like I said, insufficient housing is a health issue. And if even with me just rooting for the cause, that will make me feel like at least I'm doing something, to make my community healthy.
There's a lot of solidarity out there for a lot of the things that we fight for and care about across a wide range of issues. It's just that in the system we live in, it's hard for people to break away in order to participate. So that's why they appreciate organizations like ours stepping in. And when they can offer what little time, we say time, talent, treasure, right, that they have, they will definitely do that. Like we had an event last night and one of our members lives in the building right there. And he was like, hey, like He doesn't have a lot of time to do anything else, but he'll hand out flyers to make sure more people know about this event because it's helping people save money on their energy bills, right? Like I said, meeting people where they're at, but that's more than just like location, like I'm door knocking. That is understanding like their lived experience. If you don't think that this issue is urgent because you live in somewhere that you feel like rents are fine, things are stable, trust me, it will not stay that way for long. As this issue grows in all these big major urban cities, yeah, some people are leaving Massachusetts, but a lot more, because their lives are here, will just find other places in the suburbs and further out to try and populate. So eventually it will come to your town too. This is not an isolated issue that only folks in the bigger cities will be dealing with. Give it 5 years, give it a decade. You'll also be staring at your rent being like, wait, when did this happen to me?
Thank you for listening. You can learn more about Urban Edge at urbanedge.org and about Reclaim Roxbury at reclaimroxbury.org.